We're in Boston at the start of chapter 23. Newland has fled there, rushed there, under the pretense of a business trip. He has lied to zip up from Newport to Boston to find Ellen. We're told the sneaking around kind of bothers him, as if his conventional morality is separating a little bit from his impulsive side. The passion is not something he has agreed upon with others in the past, or at least not something he has approved of. And perhaps he's feeling a little self-conscious, perhaps he's feeling a little bit judged. He was even ashamed of the ease with which the whole thing had been done. It reminded him for an uncomfortable moment of Lawrence Lefferts's masterly contrivances for securing his freedom. But this did not long trouble him, for he was not in an analytic mood. I like that. Not being in an analytic mood is very un-Archer. He is constantly critiquing his society and the people in it. Lefferts and Beaufort, May and all of her family, even people he likes, like Riviere and Winsett. He knowingly condescends to them and has a little hesitation there. As much as he enjoys their company, he is conscious of them being economically lower, of a lower class than he is. And of course, he's very judgmental and very hesitant with Olenska based on her bohemianism. Here, however, he is participating in the drama, fully engaged as a protagonist. The plot is very hyperbolic. It is very melodramatic. He is throwing off his reservations heedlessly, acting in accordance with his own desires. And this is a sloughing off of the cooler objectivity of convention to which he is so accustomed. But you can see the book sort of rushing along with this. We are rushing to Boston with him. The plot is rushing along. And he is just sort of passively going along with it, as are we, as readers. Archer is at this moment more of the art than the artist. He is no longer sitting back and thinking about things and considering them and imagining his ideal plane. He is now very much a subject of the art within the hurly-burly of the plot contrivances, and subject to some speculation. And here he is feeling, or at least evidencing, some self-consciousness about this. It's a very meta moment, if you will, or at least it can be read that way. Yet you can see the contrast, even with something so recent, where he is rushing into this scene with Olenska. It's kind of a contrast with just the previous big moment with them together was at Newport, where he was hesitant to disturb the ideal image that she presented on the edge of that pier. He was, I don't want to say satisfied with the perfection of that image, but he was hesitant to intrude upon it, hesitant to disturb it. There was an ideal quality to it. But now here, idealism in a number of forms is being sloughed off, and he is charging headlong into it. He is a part of the melodrama now. wholeheartedly. He is a part of the art. It's part of the artifice. You could say that it's no longer even art so much as it's melodrama, because this has the feel of that, the rushing passion and all of that. At this point, the artifice of the plot is separate from the authenticity of the novel's art. The surface only obliquely suggests a significance within. The opposition of artifice from meaning is very modernist, but the shift towards a predominant plot, let's say, an engrossing plot boiler melodrama, is a turn towards more conventional narrative. So you can see these two traditions sort of tugging at one another. Archer is rejecting his own objective detachment and that of the novel as well. The novel is dragging us all into what's going to happen next. What's going to happen next? You can read that as conventional narrative becoming kind of ironic, as our own, let's say, our own hesitance or awareness that, well, this is starting to get a little cheap and soap opera-ish. You can, if you're pulling back, then you can say that, well, they're doing this kind of ironically. But doing that, ironizing the plot also means ironizing Archer within the plot, and that even further sort of smooths out the abruptive rhythms that we saw in the first half, where there were all of these little moments of deep, intense thought that dwelled on the interior individual, and they were at some odds with the social world of the plot moving along. And this only further complicates that knotty complexity of Archer's inner life rearing up into the narrative from time to time. It's now gone quiet, let's say. He is a little bit more reserved. But here in his actions, in his outward actions, he is certainly getting swallowed up by a more conventional narrative. Anyway, Archer tracks Ellen down on a very hot summer day in Boston, on Boston Common. She is staying at the Parker House, a very nice little hotel that is still there. I stayed in it once. It was very nice. And he just nonchalantly bumps into her after he, traveled all this way and went explicitly looking for her. Oh, you're here. And, okay, believable. He lies to her. Another lie. He started out lying to May, saying, "Oh, I've got this business trip in Boston and I have to go." And now he's just sort of spreading that off to Ellen as well. He learns in a little chat. They're sitting there on this sweltering Boston summer afternoon, or it's morning still. On that hot Boston day, Archer feels his own temperature rising. This is horrible. Why shouldn't we go out a little on the bay? There's a breeze and it will be cooler. We might take the steamboat down to Point Arley. She glanced up at him hesitatingly and went on. On a Monday morning, there won't be anybody on the boat. My train doesn't leave till evening. I'm going back to New York. Why shouldn't we? He insisted, looking down at her. And suddenly he broke out, "Haven't we done all we could?" "Oh," she murmured again. She stood up and reopened her sunshade, glancing about her as if to take counsel of the scene and then assure herself of the impossibility of remaining in it. Then her eyes returned to his face. "You mustn't say things like that to me." This is the first time that they've met in a year and a half now, and it's awkward, and they're not quite sure how to deal with one another. Ellen seems to instinctively understand and reject the role she is playing in this quote scene. She broaches the unspoken truth between them very defensively. He notably has this very intolerant impatience with physical discomfort. Let's say he is sweating on this day, and it's a brilliant little piece of set design for or dramaturgy, at least for Wharton, to take this guy who's naturally going to be a little anxious and make him sweat all the more. But he is seeking some kind of physical relief, and you can read the heat as a kind of reflection of his interior passion and all of that. But it's just it is making him uncomfortable, and so he is seeking to relieve it, and that is kind of the undercurrent going on there. That he is asking her to slip off somewhere quiet because no one knows that they are together, and they can do whatever they want. Theoretically. Ellen, however, lashes out. Maybe she just asks a simple question, but one that also rejects the notion of her being used as an element in this scene, this little artificial tableau. "Why didn't you come down to the beach to fetch me the day I was at Granny's?" she asked. "Because you didn't look around. Because you didn't know I was there. I swore I wouldn't unless you looked round." He laughed at the childishness of this confession. Struck him. "But I didn't look round on purpose." "On purpose?" "I knew you were there. When you drove in, I recognized the pony, so I went down to the beach." "To get away from me as far as you could?" She repeated in a low voice. "To get away from you as far as I could." Here we see that the arbitrary sign that Archer so relied on was actually a conscious act on Ellen's part. It was under her control. She had full agency in that moment, and he just didn't want to deal with that. He didn't want to consider that. He is sort of denying responsibility, again, passively accepting the world as it is, and she is shaping her destiny. She is taking her fate in her hands. She is also arguably a mature woman trying to act responsibly, and he's a little boy trying to evade blame. But that avoidance, that the divide between them, is somehow more significant as a lacuna. It creates a space for meaning that is silent. It is a presence within the absence. It is more powerful than anything that might have explicitly been said between them. This is also them admitting that their interior lives are powerful enough to compromise their exterior behavior. It's a notable opposition between the interior and the exterior. Again, that sense of tension between the public performative nature of their civilization and the interior torment of individual souls within them. But after they leave the city for this boat ride, they go back to her hotel. He waits. He thinks he sees someone he recognizes, but she comes out and they leave. They're going to go out on a little tour in the harbor and get some fresh air, get out of the city. And, you know, the city in the summer is unpleasant. They find themselves at a little seaside inn, and there is an uncomfortable silence that is sort of yawning between them from time to time. They talk, but there's more significance probably in the silences. Archer, in fact, wonders at Ellen's ability to stay cool under pressure, so to speak, on this very hot day, and while he feels all the more self-conscious in this setting where he feels that other people might be judging him or wondering about him and this strange woman or whatever, she seems perfectly at ease. By being so quiet, so unsurprised, and so simple, she had managed to brush away the conventions and make him feel that to seek to be alone was the natural thing for two old friends who had so much to say to one another. Archer's concern with appearance, Ellen's relative flaunting of conventions, these two huge factors in their lives are at play even in a quiet little moment like this. But that ends the chapter. That ... that ellipsis is the end of that chapter. That is a cliffhanger, to be sure, and thus a staple of storytelling, a very conventional mode of getting an audience to turn the page. And so it's another example of that kind of rigorous plot-driven art. But it's also a significant little gap. Again, it is pointing a bright signal on the gap, on the lacuna, on the void between one chapter and another, and inviting us to fill that void with some sort of meaning. Maybe there is meaning that isn't explicit. Maybe there is meaning that isn't performative, that isn't behavioral, that isn't observable. Maybe the greater meaning is something interior that we can't see, or maybe can't even articulate. But it's the joining of these two impulses, between the explicit and the implicit, between the gap and the and these tectonic plates of narrative that are sort of clunking around together. The gaps between them are more interesting, more significant, more pregnant with possibility. This is, again, that modernist urge sort of bubbling up between the motions and the plot points and the behaviors and the rushing here and the rushing there and the earnest conversations and all of the conflict and all of that stuff that is a staple of modern, or a staple of realist art and a staple of storytelling in general, but that modernism is starting to question. Modernism is starting to put in its corner a little bit and say, that's nice, but sometimes the greater meaning, the greater significance is within all of that stuff.